get ready for so many breakthroughs, sales pitches, information thrown at your face that you won't even know what to focus on. Welcome back, Mere Mortalites, to another edition of the Mere Mortals book reviews. Today we have the man himself, Tony Robbins, with his latest books, Life Force, also co-written by Peter Diamandis and Robert Hariri. So we've got Life Force by Tony Robbins. There he is, the man himself. Laying it out, first of all, who is Tony Robbins? He seems to me, at least, like a very widely known individual. He's a long-term motivational speaker / depends on who you ask. He seems to be well connected in around the world of finances, motivations, ideas, seems to run a lot of businesses, gives back in a myriad of ways, especially in the way of feeding people in need, which is big things. Now, Tony has done other big books in the past, and he's been around for a little while. But his latest one, which was Life Force, now this came onto the scene for me, let's say, probably 6 months out before the book was actually released, and I saw who the individuals were who was teaming up to do the book, and it was one that I actually called out from afar in terms of, hey, I want to read this book whenever it comes out. It sounds like it would be attached to some of my longer term thinking with health, longevity, staying away from the big 3-4 big killers in life, so cancers and cardiovascular disease, etc., Alzheimer's. And I went, this is probably going to be the book for me, so let's orient it that way. Now, starting from probably where all good books need to be explained is that it is a fat book, and if you're looking at the video right now, it is a thick beast. I finished reading this off about a month or 2 months ago, and it took me quite a few months. And this is not just by the length of the book itself, right? It's about 600 odd pages, 650 pages. I just went through there quite quickly looking at it. But it's also really dense. And actually, some of the notes here that I had was, first of all, that the book in itself seems to have been derived, or at least began, through conversations that happened at the Vatican. And I actually had a little note up on here because I was trying to figure out exactly, what was this Vatican event that had the Pope and quite a few other people as well. It looked to be the international conference to an effort to unite to cure. So I think Unite to Cure was the name of it. Regardless, that was the inception of a lot of the conversation, a lot of the information that is here. And, don't be fooled by the fact that it's got Tony Robbins in the front of it. It's heavy in the sense of information and knowledge. And if I was to try to describe this book, right, written in 2022, is it one that you would just go ahead and pick up as a easy, quick read? No, absolutely not. And by the denseness of the pages and the information that we'll get into as well for this book, it's a different beast altogether. So the book itself, and a bit of a synopsis, it once again, in a similar way to these sort of health books, goes around, and I'll pull the contents here so we can see the breakdown. It goes into the Life Force revolution, and it's talking about some of the large sets of information of gifts, stem cells, diagnostic powers, and then into multiple sections around regenerative medicine revolution, what you can do now, tackling the top 6 killers, and longevity, mindset, and fulfillment. And that final chapter is more to the accustomed type of book that you might read from Tony Robbins. It's got a lot more of the mindset, of the positivity, something that you'd much more expect. But those preceding 4 sections are heavy in information. I think that's probably the big key pieces when you're sort of picking up this book, and if you're trying to give it to someone, as to some of the reasons behind it. So some of the themes of this book as well is, one, it really is all about providing the practical advice, both on the physical and the emotional health perspective. Yes, a large part of this book is all around physical, and look, I'm not even going to dive into one singular topic of them. There's plenty. This is akin to some of the other books that I've read around health, longevity, and health information. There's a truckload of information down. I'm not even going to try and describe it into it, but it does a really great job into trying to dissect into each and every one. So, that's a great thing. And as I mentioned, that final section also goes into large part of emotional health and the mentality, the motivation, the mindset that one can put themselves into. The other theme that I want to just call out throughout the book is the abundance of quotes and relevance and perspectives and putting it together against a story. a lot of books do this quite well. The theme and the ideas that get brought up in this particular book, sometimes it's almost too many times that a quote is used or an example is prevailed. There's also a theme here in this book that it's written by multiple people, and you can actually tell that. So, as I mentioned, Peter Diamandis, Robert Hariri, Tony Robbins to begin with. And as you go through the book, you can actually see that it's got little spiels from different people that they're putting together. I believe Matthew Walker was one of them. There's David Sinclair, a whole host of different people throughout in this book. And the theme of almost mixing and matching who's talking, trying to present a particular perspective, it lends itself well to, for me at least, to a conversation, almost of a podcast or a video or a presentation. In a book format, not so much. And that theme to me of almost trying to showcase if it's being shown by a particular point of view wasn't its strong point, to be frank. But the inspiring stories that are presented throughout the book, if you really are motivated by those things, or it gives you a good feeling to a book, hey, you'll find plenty of them in here, because a lot of these sections and descriptions around why you should be doing something or preemptively be looking at your health or go down this path of being tested always is supported, foundationally presented by a story of a young 12-year-old kid who might have had this particular issue, went through a particular channel or diagnosis, and then became better after X amount of time. So there's a lot of that positive nature to the book as well, and that's a strong theme of, you want to be coming away from this book not thinking that, hey, woe is me, doom is the world, we're all going to go to shit because we're all getting older. No, quite differently from that. And some of the actual ways that the book is written, so I already talked about that it is quite heavy in the amount of information that's presented, and don't get me wrong, it did take, probably about 20 or 30 times that I go through this book and go, oh, I need to stop, have a bit of a look around, what's that company he's talking about, what is this information he's sharing, let me just try to understand it more so I can conceptualize it and understand it more fully as I'm reading it. And to be frank, across a mere mortal spectrum, I'm probably more connected with these things than less so. And so for me, that sort of describes, okay, you have to have a certain level of knowledge or understanding as you're going through this, but it is written cleverly and easy enough that you can go and do that extra research and come back to it and understand it fully. And it tries to describe and lay out enough information so you could just continue to read. But what this book I don't believe really is a key thing for is just being a pick up and read it, leave it back, pick it up again. Reason, I read this book once again about a month or 2 months ago, and I read it end to end over, I believe it was like a month or a little bit more than a month. And it's not one that I could just effectively go back and suggest, hey, I really like that section 3 that they were talking about. What was it? Cancer and diagnosis? Let me go check that back again. No, it's too dense in its written format to really go in and extract that. So some of the other themes around it, and I'm going to go to the cons around it here, because the way that I actually summarized here in my little notes was some of the pros and some of the cons. And unfortunately, Tony, there was a few cons throughout this book. And I'm going to probably start with the one that is the one that most heavily impacted me in my reading. And it was that there's a big play in this book of, it almost feels like a sales pitch. And I did actually write down somewhere, I don't believe it's here in the notes in front of me, but I did write it from in a few other pages, where it honestly felt like the 2 or 3 preceding pages were actually set up so as to sell the app or the environment that they were trying to set up for a business, and how a business could actually go ahead and contact them to, try to partner up. And it left a slight weird taste in my mouth. I went, that this couple of pages get written in such a way that they were the best constructed pages so that I could absorb the information and make sense, or were they written almost in a way so that it points people to go and utilize their application, or for businesses to get a bit of an extra value? Now, I will try to err on the side of caution and say there's probably value on both parties, aka there was value for me or a company or a business owner to read this, and also maybe some value back to Tony and his partners and the applications that they're building to be able to help humanity. There's going to be some value for both parties, and so I understand that. But it happened enough times throughout the book that it just made me realize, it made me at least call it out. In fact, I talked about it with Karen quite a few times. I went, sometimes as I'm reading through this, I go, is this page an advertisement or is it purely for the informational basis? And that I didn't so much enjoy too much. 2, some of the information actually presented back in this book, if you're not incredibly familiar to some of the concepts, you might take them at absolute face value. And in some of the, as I said, some of the investigations I was doing 20 to 30 times, reading through and getting a bit of information, was, hey, what's this company Tony's talking about? Why is it so good? Again, this was written at a point in time. And some of the statistics that's pulled up, I went, wait a minute, this kind of doesn't compute with what I've kind of heard in other places. One of the most memorable ones, I believe, in this book was the conversation of the average age span of humanity and how that has been affected by a particular set of reasons and how humanity in general is not meant to age to a particular point. And I went, hold on a moment. There's other reasons and reasons around child mortality rates and the like that didn't really get presented. So I'm not saying that it was wrong in the information that was presented here, but you always have to be very careful on how is information shared, presented, and is it diluted in the way that it's shared so that it's not fully understood? Now, throughout the book, it did end up getting called out about the child rate mortality does move that average downwards, but it happened enough times in the preceding pages, and I'm talking like through the preceding 50 pages, that I went, yeah, I don't know if that this is correct or absolutely correct. And this can get really quite tricky when you yourself are pondering, almost debating whether they've done the due diligence in some of the aspects, and again, calls into question some of the other aspects throughout the book. Now, I'm not saying that the entirety of the book was absolutely, not well presented or reviewed or understood. No, I'm not saying that at all. But I would say that that happened enough times with statistics or information that it calls into question the validity of other things, and I don't really enjoy that for books in generality. 3, just the book is long, like really, really long. That to me was just a big piece that I'm going to have to guess here. Got to about 400 odd pages and I went, okay, there's enough information here that I'm reading. This is almost textbook, density, textbook length. I don't want to continue reading this. It felt like it's slightly too long. And if for me, who I'm into fitness, I'm into health longevity, I'm into understanding these things at really quite deep levels, I could see someone like a Karen or other people who, I don't know how they'd get through this. Honestly, I have no idea how you would get through the entirety of this in a really quite motivated fashion. I did actually fast forward through a couple of pages, got to that final section that I was talking about, which is the more general Tony Robbins motivational / ideas and concepts and philosophies. Loved it. That was really fantastic. But yes, throughout it, I did find that there were some aspects where I just slowed down / I don't really want to continue reading this anymore. And that also obviously shifts the ideas around it and how I feel about it as well. So yeah, overall, as a summary for me, I ended up going with a 7 out of 10. Lots of information, good. Was it all 100% correct? I can't say so. Did it sometimes feel like I was reading something that should have been better placed as almost a conversation between people? Yes. But then in other forms, it was also written quite well. It was effective reading. It provided enough reference and quotes that it seemed really, good to read. I wasn't disappointed that I would read it, but who I would recommend this book to? There is a couple of people in my life, naturopaths, maybe someone into the scientific field, that I'd say, hey, if you haven't gone through and maybe understood what the latest concepts in, cancer studies or diagnosis, or how you might improve your life or become better, maybe I'd say go and reference this, but I'd almost say go reference this so that you can go and find out more information through your own levels of research, not take this as the Bible that it might be. So, and I kind of came into it potentially with an expectation that it might be that, and so kind of faltered a few steps around that. But so be it. You got to try it out and see how it goes. So, Life Force by Tony Robbins with Peter Diamandis, and Robert Hariri. Look, left me wanting for a little bit more, but with such a fat book, there's probably going to be a lot of concept that I might have missed, ideas that might have just not landed with me. But overall, I also have limited amount of time, and perhaps I just didn't give it its due course. So let me know what you think about Tony Robbins' Life Force book if you have gone and read it? Did you find it interesting, boring? Did it take a while? Did you have to do a lot of research? Did you find numbers in there or ideas that you went, hey, wait a minute, this seems off with some other understanding? Yeah, let me know all of that. Again, we're a value for value channel, which means we do appreciate if you can send through a Boostgram, Satoshi streaming through the podcast platforms out there that allow it, things like Fountain. Go and try them out if you haven't. We talk about it in our main Me Immortals podcast as well. If you haven't, go check that out. Go do so as well. But for now, Me Immortalites, I'm going to leave it there. Life Force by Tony Robbins. Hope you have a great day wherever you are in the world. One out.